Since we added our randomly generated large amount of sample data, it's given us a chance to get a feeling for how the application works with a large amount of data, which is real world, right? Now, the issue is, whenever you get into a situation like this, well, it's sometimes referred to as the trifecta of UI design, basically filtering, sorting, and paging. Those three things together are almost always required then whenever you have a large amount of records that you're dealing with, right? So in step 7 now, 7A, we're going to begin with filtering, and that's what we're going to start here on the patient index view, okay? So let me just stop running here, bring up the actual patient index view, and what we're going to do is right above the table itself here, I'm going to throw in a little form where we can choose items to filter by and submit it back again to the index view. So the next time we display the index, it is actually filtered by what we have put here. So don't worry, this form isn't going to be here for very long. We're going to be making some big improvements to it, but just to keep it simple at the very beginning. Action, notice is index. Might say, wait, we're on the index view. So we're just posting back to the same action that got this view here in the first place. Method is get. Okay, then I just have a little form here. We've got 3 inputs, a drop-down list here for doctor ID, medical trial ID. Those are 2 foreign keys that exist inside the patient class, right? And then a search string, right? The search string will allow us to type characters that we want to appear in the patient name. Now, I'm going to limit it to the first and last name combined. I'm not going to worry about searching the middle initial, okay? If you want to change that, it's easily done, but that's what I'm going to do. And finally, I have an input type is submit, okay? But I want to point out this right away. I'm adding a name and value. Now, the value is used in the past, right? It gives us basically our caption on the button itself. But by giving a combination of both name and value together, it forms a name-value pair that gets submitted to the actual action of the query, of the controller, when we do click the submit button. So eventually, what we're going to have, I'm mentioning it now so you're aware, we're going to have multiple different buttons, all with the same name, action button, and the value, we'll be able to examine the value for the name-value pair and find out with the different values which of the actual buttons we've clicked, right? So for now, we're starting off with the one button anyway, and away we go. All right. So nothing's going to happen, though, until I come to the controller and deal with this additional information. So notice we've got 3 inputs, doctor ID, medical trial ID, and search string, right? So let me come to the patient controller. Right up here in the index then, what we're going to do, first of all, is add parameters so we can immediately grab the values coming from those 3 controls. Okay? Nullable search string, nullable doctor ID integer, and nullable medical trial ID integer. Okay, those are 2 foreign keys, and away we go. All right. Now, thing is, okay, in order to show these drop-down lists, okay, it's a little different format. Notice that instead of using the select as we do on the edit and the create, I'm actually using this HTML helper here to build our drop-down list. It works better in a situation like this because we aren't binding, right? These are unbound controls. They're just a list for us to choose from. Whereas on the edit or create view, the select list is actually you bound to a property of the actual model, right? That's not the case here. These are just giving us drop downs. So we find it better to use this approach to getting the elements up on the screen. Mind you, when the data comes in, it's just an integer with the appropriate name, right? However, we still have to provide data for our drop-down list, medical trial and doctor and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so how do we get those in place? Well, remember, we'll go Control-MO for a second. Way down here, look at this, populate drop-down lists. Remember, we called our 2 select lists for the medical trials and the doctor ID. So that will add in the view data, everything we need to give data for these drop-down lists themselves. So this actual, when it's referring here to doctor ID and medical trial ID, okay, it's actually also going to then incorporate looking in view data for select lists with those ID or keys for the key value pair, right? Okay, so that's how we get the data in there to begin with. So we've already done all that work. So all I really have to do back up here in index is go like this. This is beautiful. We're reusing the work we did earlier, right? I just have to call a nice simple populate drop-down list, okay? Notice I don't provide anything in the brackets here, right? Because I'm not going to try and pre-filter it for any values. I just want all the values. And back again in the index, notice that when I look at the different parameters here, okay, there's an option label there. I'm saying none. Here I'm saying all doctors, right? It's the option label. So that will be automatically added at the top before the data coming from the actual view data itself when we call populate drop-down list. Okay. All right. Now we do want to make sure, and we're getting our data here with all the includes that we needed, and we have .as no tracking. The point is we have to make sure it's an iQueryable of patient objects. Okay. So I might even add these comments that I have in my copy paste file, even though the query itself is already exactly what we want. But I'm just going to throw in some comments here. Start with includes, but make sure your expression returns iQueryable so we can filter and sort options later. That's important because it's an iQueryable, right? We can continue to add more and more elements, you might say, to the query, okay? Where conditions, order bys, and so on, right? Before we actually call it to execute. So we have our parameters coming. Pardon me. Sorry. Okay. So we have our parameters coming in for the different things we want to search by. So it's as simple as this. Because we just have a simple iQueryable, I can go like this. As many filters as needed. Hey, does my doctor ID parameter here have a value? If it does, look at this. I can take patients as is defined so far and add a where clause. .where. Okay, the doctor ID, that's the foreign key inside the actual patient object, matches my parameter. Okay, but I can just keep on going. I can add yet another. Okay, if I have a value for a medical trial, then I can add yet another .where, right? And it's a cumulative. Each one that I add is added to the query as I go. Now, for my search string, okay, I can do it something like this, okay? If it's not true, I've got the bang there, that it's null or empty. In other words, I have something to search by. Then I can come down here, patients where. I'm going to take last name, convert it to upper, and see if it contains the search string converted to upper, just keeping the case so there's no case differences to play a role in the filtering, right? So it doesn't matter whether I do uppercase or lowercase. Or same thing for the first name, right? Okay, and that's it. So now, when I'm actually executing the query, which happens, of course, right here, it will return the values that are matching all my different where clauses. So let's go ahead and run it, and we'll see the effect now when I go to the patient index view. Okay, patient index. And here we have my filters, so I can go to, all doctors or just whoever I want, say Gregory House, click filter, and that's it. I only see patients for Gregory House. Now, how about a medical trial? Okay, all right. Okay, two different ones here, and these are all no. So I'm going to go to the, sorry, this one was one of them. Okay, filter on that. There we go, and we're down to just the one patient that has this doctor in this medical trial, right? Let me clear that. Let's get a patient name in here as well. So let's try to find. Okay, so we have at least two, patients for this same family doctor in the same medical trial, right? So now let me add my third criteria here, searching the patient name for the letter M. The letter M looks like it is only in one of the two patients. There we go. So now I've filtered down to the one patient that matches all three criteria. Pretty good, eh? Now my clear button, I forgot to point that out in code. All it does is it sends a request back to index without passing any parameter values, right? How does it do that? Well, let's have a look again. Okay, going back to the index. Okay, it's just a straight ASP action is index, right? So we aren't submitting this form, unlike our submit button submits the form and all the parameters go along with it. Instead, we're just doing a direct get request for the index action, no values being passed for filtering. Okay, so pretty good. We've actually got it working already. But you know what? It doesn't look as good as it could, right? When we have it up on the screen, it's taking up space there all the time. Well, we recently learned about things like the bootstrap collapse, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we could actually have the filter region collapsed, click a button or something to have it expand so we can then apply a filter? And ooh, wouldn't it be nice if it stays open if there's any filter applied, but then goes back to collapsed if there is no filter? Ah, that's kind of what we would eventually want to get. But to do this as well, one thing I'm going to do, we talked about this before, I like to have everything contained inside the form. So instead of taking this approach exactly, I'm going to put my code in place here that's a little bit different, okay? Basically, I've got much the same here. The opening form tag, but of course it's complaining because I don't have a closing form tag. I'm going to go right down to the end of the table. And after the table here is where I'll put the /form, right? So that will close off the form there. And again, Control Craft Inner, Control KD, fix all my indentation, and away I go. Okay, so what have I done here? Well, it's basically the same. See, this part is all the same. Select by doctor, filter by medical trial, search patient name, right? Still my same drop-down list, okay? I have my input type is submit, name is action button, values filter, and my simple link to call simply a get request for the index action. That's all good. But we've put it inside of this, okay? A div here, classes collapse. And by the way, if you have the keyword show inside, if you say collapse show, that's in my notes here in the copy paste file, then the div will be first displayed open. It won't be collapsed. If you don't have the word show in there, okay, then it will be collapsed when it first appears on the screen. And what we've done is we've added a button up above it, okay, and I'm going to have the type of button changed based on information I throw in this name value pair filtering. We'll see in code in a minute, okay? But it's my toggle for the collapse, okay? I give it an ID, but of course over here, the target is collapse filter, okay? The element with that ID, which of course that is the div showing the actual filter region itself. This whole div here is ID collapse filter, right? So again, we're just making good use of the bootstrap collapse. Okay, I'm going to say filter /search. And I'm also going to throw into view data some information about how many filters there actually are being applied. That can be useful as well to have that on the screen. Okay, with those changes to the actual view, let's come back to the controller again. And this time we're going to add a little bit more, okay, because I want to provide that information, the count of how many filters there are and things like that, right? So back in the controller, I'm going to add a bit of code. This will put it right here at the top. Even above when I call populate drop-down list, although it could go below it as well. But anyway. All right. So this is the style then, okay, that I'm going to apply to the filter button itself, okay, unless it's actually filtering. So it'll just be a nice outline, okay, just to give it a nice, so it's kind of in the background. And I'm going to set my number of filters equal to 0. Then for each test for filtering, I'll add to the count of how many filters are applied, right? So I still start with my includes and so on and so forth. The only thing I'm going to do here really is inside each of these tests, right, down here, I will just add an increment to the number of filters. So every time I actually find something to filter by, I add 1 to the number of filters that I'm counting, right? Okay, then I'm going to have a bit of code here just to help me give all that valuable feedback to the screen, okay? So if the number of filters is not equal to 0, so we're actually filtering by at least one thing, okay? Then I'm going to toggle the open close state of the collapse, depending if we're filtering, okay? So we actually are filtering, so I'm going to change the style of the button to danger. That'll be nice bright red, okay? So it's a visual clue. It'll go dark and one solid color to give a clue that it is actually being applied, the filter. And we're going to show how many filters. Okay, so I'm going to take my number of filters, toString, and I'm going to basically show, how many filters are applied, right? And then we also want to keep the Bootstrap collapse open so that other view data name value pair show filter, I'll put the word show in that. So remember again, that one's right here, the collapse, so it'll always keep it open as long as we're filtering. But if we're not filtering, it'll go back to being closed. Okay. All right, so let's just run and see the changes that we've made so far. Okay, now going to patients. All right, so we see our filter button here, but it's not taking up near as much room, but I can click and expand, and there we have select by doctors, my medical trials. So if I want to see everybody in this medical trial alone, there we are. Look at that. Filter search, one filter applied, right? Okay, now if I pick a doctor, Gregory House, now I have two filters applied, right? I can always clear, and if I clear, we go back to not displaying the collapse region at all, right? And it doesn't indicate that any filters are currently being applied. So that's, I think, a big step forward, right? Okay, all right. Just before we wrap up the filtering, why don't we think about adding one more filter, okay? What if we just want to see all the patients that have, say, cancer in their medical history, right? How would we go about that? Well, let's stop running for a minute. Basically, coming back to the index here, right? We got all the data for our our populate drop-down lists for our two foreign keys from the code that we already had in place. Well, we don't have any code to generate a select list for our medical conditions. And since we're not going to use it anywhere else but here for our filter, I'm just going to add the code for this extra select list that we need, right? So that we have the data to provide that as well. So maybe I'll put it right under populate drop-down lists. Okay. Extra select list for conditions. So I'll add to view data condition ID. So this is kind of how we write it. I don't need it anywhere else, just here for this filter. So it'll make a new select list, okay? Going into my conditions, ordering by the condition name, passing the two values, the ID and the condition name, okay, to be displayed on the screen, right? Okay. Then let's just assume we have added that drop-down list to the view. How do then we handle that? Well, we come down here and we're going to add yet another if. But this is a collection. So we want to see, are there any, okay, patient conditions that belong to the patient that are for this particular condition? Well, for that, we're going to take advantage of the operator .any, right? So here's what the code looks like in the end to add this extra filter. If our condition ID has, I've got to add the parameter at the top. I missed that, but I'll go back and do that. If it has value, so we actually have a condition to filter by, then we're going to add an extra where clause where the patient conditions .any, okay, have any member in the collection where the condition ID matches our parameter. And of course, we increment our count of how many filters there is, right? Okay, so we have to add yet another parameter right at the top of the index up here, right? So I'm going to maybe push enter after this one so that we get down and we can see more clearly all the data without scrolling left and right. So 4 parameters now: search string, doctor ID, medical trial ID, and condition ID. Okay, good. All right, so that's everything we actually have to do in the controller. But in the index now we want to add this 4th filter. But, it's getting a little crowded across, okay? Here we're using we have a row, right? That's our class using the Bootstrap grid system. We have, on a medium or above, we have a column taking up 4 out of the 12 for our doctor, 4 out of the 12 for the medical trial, 4 out of the 12 for the patient name. Ooh, what's happening here? We have 4 out of the 12 for the button. So basically, because we've used up all 12, this gets pushed down to the next row or pushed down underneath the other ones, right? That's how this is currently arranged. But I'm going to make a slight change here to the whole card body. I'm going to lay it out a little bit differently so things will fit on the screen a little bit better, right? So I'm going to replace the card body with this revised version, taking more advantage, again, of the grid system available from Bootstrap. So I'm going to have one row here, a column of width 4 and width 6. Okay, so I'll leave a little white space at the end. That's okay. So I have my select list for doctor and one for the medical trial. I want to give a little bit more room for the medical trial, so those big long names, when we hit the drop-down list, there's a bit more room maybe to show that, so to speak. Then I'm going to start a new row, okay, with the 4 to 12 for my drop-down list of conditions. So here, it's a bit similar to the ones we already had. HTML drop-down list for condition ID. At the top, I'll have this option label, all conditions, right? And underneath will be the actual sorted list of the names of the different conditions, okay? And then here's our text box for the search patient name, right? And then our buttons should fit on this line now in this row because we have 4 plus 4 plus 4. So our buttons should probably be at the end there. Okay, that's it. That's all the changes I'm going to make. So let's run it and see the effect of putting this new revised version of the code in place. Coming to patients. Okay, now I'll click my filter and see I've got it arranged a little differently. So I've given lots of room here for this one, right? But notice that the next row, things are arranged a little differently, right? Because this was a 4 and a 6. Now I have a 4 and a 4 and a 4 with the buttons over here left aligned in this region, this width of 4, right? So now let's just try all conditions. No, let me just pick cancer. Now, of course, I have not actually added a lot of sample data here for medical history for the different conditions. So it's kind of hard. Let me clear. Let me just come back into Barney Rubble. Let's edit Barney here. Come down, I'm going to check off. There we go. So now we have at least 2 people, right, with that condition. So I can choose that one, and I see the 2 patients there, right? But they have the same doctor. But one's in a medical trial, the leukemia one. So if I apply that filter as well, see now I've got 2 filters applied, and I'm down to just the 1 patient who has cancer and is in the leukemia treatment medical trial. Okay? All right. Very good. So that's just a slightly different arrangement, but you see it works pretty nicely as we shrink down, get below the breakpoint for a medium, then everything will just go vertical. And it looks perfectly fine that way as well in terms of the filter section. Of course, if I clear, then the filter section collapses and it doesn't take up hardly any space on the screen. Well, that's it. That's the end of our lesson on filtering. So we're going to go on and keep on building on this, next with sorting, and then finally paging.